everyone, it's Mrs. Bradley here, and this is your final AO2 quote from an inspector calls from me, and it's from the inspector. We are members of one body, taught it in broad blood and fire and anguish. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to jot down the quote in the middle of a blank page, and I want you to annotate the quote with absolutely everything you can think of and remember. So who says it, when do they say it, who do they say it to, what does the quote actually mean in its very, very basic literal sense. Then grab a highlighter, highlight the words that you think is important. What type of words are they? So Google them. Are they verbs, nouns? Is it a metaphor, simile? What do they mean and what do they show about the character, what they're trying to communicate? So during this video there's going to be moments where you pause, and this is one of them. So if you can press pause on me now and spend 5-10 minutes, everything you can possibly remember about this quote, and then press play again and we'll be on the next slide. Okay, welcome back to the next slide. So what we're going to do now is I've written some questions here that are going to provide a bit of a scaffold, if you like, to stretch your answers. So you're going to be able to think about some different questions that you might have forgotten, and if you've managed to write a lot, you're just going to check off what you've written against these questions. The red ones are the easiest ones, the orange are sort of middly questions, and the green ones are the hardest. So who is the inspector an allegory for? When does the inspector say this, and in what way or ways does he sound powerful, and what does he want the people he's talking to learn? What type of word is we, and why does he use the word? Who are the we? What can you relate this quote to the Bible? How does it relate? What sort of word is taught, and why does he use it? And what are the connotations for the symbols of blood and fire? Finally, what does the word anguish mean? Might be worth Googling it, finding a definition, and what does he mean? Why does he use that word? So I'm going to give you 5 minutes or so. Just pause me, use those questions, try and add some more analysis, and then you can press play again. Okay, so as ever, we're going to talk through some possible interpretations to the quote. You can pause me and jot down everything that you can remember and everything that it says here. Please try and get absolutely everything down onto your sheet of paper from these PowerPoints. This is going to become your prototype. It's going to become the thing that you refer back to. So the inspector delivers this message. It's a final message to the family before he leaves. He's a proxy, which is like a stand-in figure for a judge and a jury. He delivers a judgment on those that believe they were untouchable. He's an allegory for Priestley himself and for a socialist ideology. He subverts our expectation for the detective genre. There's no one culprit. It's, you know, when we start this play, it becomes a bit of a whodunit, and we find out that it's not one person that's done it. It's a collection of people that are all to blame. Now, he says that quote as if it's a fact, and we call that a declarative sentence. It almost sounds like you can't disagree with him. We are members. There's a certainty there. So if we looked at the pronoun we, it makes it really clear that as a society, we're all connected, we're all responsible. You can't separate us. We're together. And unless we support one another, things are going to be bad. When he talks about members of one body, it's actually an allusion to the book of Genesis. And so what the inspector's doing here is he's sort of echoing God's words. He's become an agent of God, preaching on behalf of God. And if you remember, during this time it would have been a very predominantly Christian audience. The idea that somebody might be acting in a way in which God would disapprove of might be quite terrifying. So it's just a reminder here that, you know, he's doing God's work. Now, the metaphor, we're members of one body, because obviously we're not, so we're saying it's a metaphor. We're saying Priestley uses a metaphor to suggest the idea that, you know, our body cannot function unless every part works together. If one part of the body isn't working properly, it can have a consequence on other parts of the body. And the inspector's making it clear that society acts in the same way. It's a complex living organism that must work together. And if one part of the body fails, then it's all of us that pays the price and suffers. What he presents in this section of the quote, we're members of one body, it's almost utopian. It's almost like a perfect world in which war is avoidable and community is a priority. Okay, I just had a technical problem, so I've paused it and started again. So I'm going to go from the verb taught, but I apologise if you think she's just said that. The verb taught is used to highlight the idea that he is here to teach them a lesson, that this is a learning point. And we'd say that this play is didactic. It's like he's teaching us a moral lesson and he doesn't ask us, he tells us. And it's almost a prophecy for the future. He tells us in a way like, you will be taught this, this will happen, it is destined to come true. So he's making his point, and then because the Berlins think they've got away with it, they don't learn their lesson. And so at the end, a real inspector is sent to say almost you can't escape what's going to happen. And it reflects the real world, that if you do something, there's going to be a consequence if lessons aren't learned. Now, if I move on to the next... Oh, I'm going to pause it and try again. And we're back. So it says here we're going to look at the imagery of fire. Now, fire here is used as a symbol. So although fire is a noun, it is a symbol, and there's many connotations of it. In terms of religion, and remember he's sort of echoing God's words here, fire is a cleansing force. It burns away the skin, taking you back to sort of your original form. But it's also a punishment for those that reject God's message. You know, if you reject the inspector's message, you're committing a sin. You're being gluttonous, or, you know, there's too much pride. And so that this is a reminder that hell is waiting and punishment is waiting, which is shown through the symbol of fire. A key Christian belief is that you should love thy neighbour, that you should care for others, and that's something that the Berlins have lost sight of, and the inspector is reminding all of us at the end of the play. Now, fire also suggests the coming of war. If you think about when the play is set, and we've had the Great War and the Second World War, it is a reminder that war is, and fire is, a destructive force on a colossal scale. And this reflects the Berlins' incapacity to keep up with the changes. Lessons weren't learned in the Great War, which was meant to be the war to end all wars, and there was a Second World War. So lessons haven't been learned, and we're being reminded of that in this quote. The classes united during war. War taught us to work together, and he's reminding us of that. Now here we're looking at a technique called polysyndeton, and polysyndeton is a repetition of the word and to emphasise the words in between. So we could use a comma. He could have said blood, fire and anguish. It's a rule of 3 as well. Instead, he uses polysyndeton for blood and fire and anguish, and what it does is it highlights each word as a standalone concept to give you time to pause after each word and think and consider the importance and the lesson. It sounds apocalyptic, it sounds like a prophecy, and it emphasises the scale of the suffering. If we look at the symbolism of blood, again we're reminded that if you do not look after others, if you only look after yourself, it can lead to injury and death. Blood will be spilt, people will die, and we will feel their loss. And so we need to think about others and a fairer society in order to stop any bloodshed. And finally, when he talks about anguish, so he talks about the fact that we will suffer, that it will hurt. And then the inspector leaves, and it's an abrupt sort of mic drop moment where he leaves. There's no room for discussion. No one can ask questions. He just walks out, and that's that. So what I'd want you to do now is I'd want you to grab a sheet of paper. I want you to rewrite the quote in a blank sheet of paper, turn over this revision so you can't see any of the notes, and jot down absolutely everything that you think you can remember from this session. Then I want you to turn back over all the analysis that you've written today, and I want you to check off, literally tick off, highlight the things that you've forgotten, have another go, and keep repeating that every couple of days. Go back to the quote, write it down, check it off, A couple of days later, do the same. The other thing that's quite good is you could copy this quote up onto a poster, onto a vision card, cue card, in a notebook. The act of rewriting and rewriting will put it into your long-term memory. Thank you very much.